and so I don't forget. And in a second, I will hit the live stream. I guess we should just, even though it's back to back, we should just stick with the times.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Here's the link to the Q&A in case you all want to watch it during your presentations. I'll moderate the Q&A at the end, but in case you want to look at what's coming in.
Yeah, I'm gonna maybe wait just a second because right now it says only 2 people online. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, that might be. Trying to figure out how to navigate over.
2 presentations.
Could make for a very intimate presentations.
Yeah.
Just 2 people.
All right, I'm gonna turn off my video and noise. People are coming. It's going up. So when it gets to like 12:01, Natalie, I'll start the live stream, I guess, if you're okay with like.
Okay.
Oh, it's 12:01. Here we go.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our next Big Water Cycle session. I'd like to thank our session sponsor, the Wisconsin DNR. Our first presenter in the session is Mike Friis, who leads the resource policy team with the Division of Intergovernmental Relations at the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, and he'll be giving us an overview of the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program. Mike's presentation will be followed by a presentation by Lydia Salas and Adam Arend, who are both Wisconsin Sea Grant, Wisconsin Coastal Management Program Fellows. They'll be telling us about updating the Coastal Processes Manual to promote resiliency on Wisconsin's Great Lakes shorelines. So please remember to type your questions into the Q&A section. We'll have an opportunity for question and answer at the end of the presentations, and you can upvote questions that you want answered. Please also respond to the poll question, which will close at 12:20 p.m. And Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Natalie. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for your interest in both Adam and Lydia's work, as well as this little background on the Coastal Management Program. I'd like to start off by saying that if you've had the opportunity to visit any one of Wisconsin's Great Lakes communities, you've likely enjoyed something that was developed as a result of a Coastal Management Program investment. In short, the Coastal Management Program is made possible through the Coastal Zone Management Act of 1972. It creates a voluntary state and territorial federal partnership to collectively manage the nation's coastal resources according to state priorities within the context of a national system. 34 of 35 eligible entities participate in the Coastal Management Program. It's administered through the U.S. Department of Commerce and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The Coastal Zone Management Act offers financial and technical assistance to state programs. The Wisconsin Coastal Management Program is one of the first 10 nationally that was federally approved, and the first in the Great Lakes in 1978. The program's geography or area of interest are the 15 Great Lakes counties. That's approximately 1,000 miles of coastline. It's a network program housed within the Department of Administration, works with partnered state agencies, and academics, nonprofits, and local governments. We have an advisory body, a 14-member governor-appointed Wisconsin Coastal Management Council that has representation from the state legislature, both the Assembly and Senate, UW Grant, local governments, nonprofits, and the public at large. The Coastal Management Program is a balanced program empowering sustainable community development and providing for public access and resource protection. The Coastal Management Program sees its responsibilities to give all people an opportunity to experience Wisconsin's coasts. These experiences enrich lives and allow people to develop their personal stewardship ethic for these special places and our coastal resources. So given that, our guiding principle is enjoy and protect Wisconsin's Great Lakes coastal resources. One of the more visible things that we do is we have a pass-through grant program that we annually provide grants to state agencies, local governments, nonprofits, academics. Our grant program areas include wetland habitat protection, non-point source pollution control, coastal resource and community planning, Great Lakes education, and public access and historic preservation. Wetland protection focuses on enhancing government capacity, inventory of wetland resources, ordinance development, education, and training. Our non-point pollution control improves coordination within state agencies and local governments to address non-point pollution control, strengthens governmental capacity to control non-point, results in permit. We don't look to fund projects that are the result or requirement of a permit or regulatory action. Coastal resource and community planning. Again, we're looking to focus on coastal resource protection, enhance public participation. Examples of projects that we have is resiliency work resulting from the 2016-18 flooding in Lake Superior Basin, the Renard Island, a former confined disposal facilities, restoration and reuse plan, work within the Menominee Valley in Milwaukee, and trail and corridor planning in northern Wisconsin. Great Lakes education, focus on regional important areas. We have strong partnerships through this with UW Extension, Sea Grant, partnering on things like our National Research Reserves Rivers to Lakes program. And the bottom right picture is from the Port Explorium in Port Washington. Sorry. So the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, again, sees providing public access as very important because it gives people a chance to develop their own personal relationship with our coastal resources. So we fund things like trails, acquisitions. We work with local and state governments with these projects. We provide technical assistance and financial assistance to develop plans. And preliminary engineering detail and breakdown for projects to enhance their opportunity to capture additional funding. The Wisconsin Coastal Management Program has established leads and partners with many state, regional, and national, and even international efforts. I'm the former chair of the Coastal States Organization that represents all 35 coastal states and territories. We have staff that lead the Great Lakes Beach Association. We led in the development of the Wisconsin Harbor Towns Association and partner with Sea Grant closely on the Wisconsin Clean Marina Program. And here's just an example of some of those. Some of the projects that we've done directly through the program and with partnerships include the Coastal Actions for Resilience and Economic Security, the CARES project. The project is, we're the co-PI, and it fosters a community of practice to develop introspective assessments within communities, fund and facilitate planning elements related to coastal resiliency in Southeast Wisconsin. It's focused on beaches, bluffs, and port facilities. Another ongoing project that we have is our WIDKey, the Wisconsin Coastal Management Data Infrastructure. It's a NOAA-funded project of special merit that grew out of the impacts of infrastructure from the 2016-18 flooding in the Lake Superior Basin. It develops, we were developing and sharing relevant geospatial data to create greater resiliency in the increasing occurrence of flooding events in Lake Superior. So with it, that was a brief overview of the program, and I'd like you to probably what you really wanted to hear from our Lydia and Adam. Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, I think we're ready for Adam to start us off. Adam, I think you're on mute.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Adam Arend, and I'm here with my partner, Lydia Salles, and we are the J. Philip Keeler Fellows at Wisconsin Sea Grant, the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program. And we're here to talk to you about one of our major projects that we've been working on the past about year and a half, and also the fellows before us have worked on, the Coastal Processes Manual, which is a resource that will help promote resiliency along Wisconsin's Great Lakes coast. So I guess particularly the past, at least maybe a couple weeks ago when I don't know, it was in the single digits, I thought a lot about some of my favorite memories of playing on the beach as a child, maybe wishing for some of that warmer weather. And you know, as I said, some of my fondest memories were on the beach, playing with my cousins and building sand villages and castles, kind of your classic childhood activities. But simply building a sand village is rather boring for me personally. I was more interested in the erosive power of water. So my cousins and I made it a challenge to build a village close enough to the water where big waves could reach. And we would fiercely erect seawalls and revetments. We didn't have names for them, but essentially walls made of sand and seashells in an attempt to protect the village from being washed away. Now, it was a very difficult challenge, and we failed more often than we succeeded, which was kind of part of the excitement. And this was a never-ending source of amusement to myself and my cousins. And I actually have a personal picture of one of the sand villages I built with my cousins. I mean, this picture is probably about 12 years old at this point. And I actually went back the day after and took a picture of the remains of the foundations a day later. And you can see the remains of the wall here, and then the foundations of one of the buildings in the back left corner here. Now, I was reflecting on this experience the other day. I realized it's kind of an apt metaphor for what we're seeing along the Great Lakes coastline today. With you know, as my cousins and I discovered, the erosive power of water is powerful, and it can be incredibly difficult to protect structures from eroding waves, eroding wind. And pictures like this one here from Ozaukee County have become more popular and with water levels reaching record highs in the past couple of years. Now, there has been heightened interest in coastal protection and resiliency, and this is where we hope our Coastal Processes Manual can help. Now, this manual will provide coastal homeowners and technical staff with background information and resources on coastal processes and how to be resilient in the face of fluctuating water levels.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. So before we dive into talking about the Coastal Processes Manual, I wanted to provide some context about Lake Michigan's water levels. So after experiencing some record low lake levels in 2013, Lake Michigan experienced about 8 months of record high lake levels from January to August of 2020. So this graph here is showing us the surface water elevation of Lake Michigan over the last 100 years. And what we can see is these long-term variations of the lake levels as they cycle through periods of both highs and lows. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is projecting that water levels will remain above average into 2021, and over the next few months, they could possibly reach levels near those previously set monthly record highs. So this graph is a little bit busy, but what it's showing us is the height in feet, if you're looking over here on the left, above or below a measured datum from the end of 2019 to the beginning of 2021. And what we're seeing is about a 6-foot range for Lake Michigan's water levels from 1 foot below the chart datum here set during these record low times to about 5 feet above the chart datum set during the record highs, which are these black dashed lines. And so if you follow this red line, these are the actual, measured water levels that we've seen. And we're right up here at the top of that 5-foot range. So this blue line here, I'll just point out, is the average water levels. And so this box, one last thing to highlight in this graph, is showing the Army Corps' 6-month forecast, where you can see that water levels are expected to rise again in the spring when snow melts and precipitation increases. So we can see that they're expecting water levels to rise again in the next few months. So water levels and coastal storms interact with each other to increase erosion of the shoreline. Coastal storms are an annual occurrence on Lake Michigan, but in the fall of 2019 and the winter of 2020, Lake Michigan's southeastern Wisconsin coastal communities experienced storms that caused millions of dollars in damage. And one way to think about how storms interact with high water levels is through wave impact height. So wave impact height is the height above the top of a beach at which waves can reach. And it is a combination of 3 things. First, the water level of the lake. And then second, the storm surge height, which is really just the piling up of water along the coast due to storm winds and some changes in atmospheric pressure. And then finally, this wave setup and run up piece. So high water levels provide an elevated baseline here for wave impact height when coastal storms do occur, which allows those waves to reach higher elevations on the shore where they can erode coastal beaches and bluffs, and they can also batter existing shoreline infrastructure. So these photos are from Wisconsin Civil Air Patrol, and the circles that are popping up on the screen are showing the same spot 3 years apart. This is a really great visual that captured how much land this property had lost to the lake in the span of 3 years during that high water level period, or this high water level period. And so this issue is not unique to this property. It's happening all along Wisconsin's Great Lakes shorelines. Erosion, however, can also occur during periods of low water levels. This set of pictures is from a low water period, and they show a revetment that was installed along the length of the UW Concordia shoreline. You can see it's a little bit blurry, but this is the edge of the revetment here. And 5 years later, there's evidence of erosion and flanking immediately adjacent to the structure. And so what I want to emphasize with these stories is that increased erosion is seen during high and low water periods due to both impacts from coastal natural processes, but also some anthropogenic or influences from people on the shoreline. And so as Adam mentioned, we're really hoping that this manual will bring together all that kind of scattered information, but it will bring it all together for property owners and technical staff so they have all this background on coastal processes that they need in one place to help make informed decisions and estimate risk. So with that, I will pass it back to Adam to dive a little bit deeper into the manual.
Thanks, Lydia. So, as Lydia was showing some pictures from the past, erosion isn't a novel problem. Now, this illustration here actually came from the very first report on Lake Michigan shore erosion in Milwaukee County way back in 1945. Now, this illustration showcases their growing concern in the erosive power of Lake Michigan, which is figuratively portrayed as a Roman Greco god, the god Poseidon. Now, so we also have another photo here from 1945, but honestly, if you colored it in, it wouldn't look out of place today. So my point here is stressing that it is important to remind people that erosion is an ever-present feature of the Great Lakes. And erosion concerns have been around as long as permanent structures have gone down along the shoreline. And erosion will always be a concern going forward for structures built along the coastline and bluffs of Wisconsin. Now, Phil Keeler here was the first Wisconsin coastal engineer, and he conceived the first edition of the Coastal Processes Manual. Now, the first edition of this document was created in response to many erosion-related questions that Phil received from concerned landowners and municipal staff during the high water levels in 1988. Now, since that initial draft, The manual has only been updated once, and that was back in 1998. So it has been long overdue for an update. This manual exists, again, as Lily and I mentioned, to provide an understanding of coastal risks and flooding, including some simple calculations on flood risk, recession rates, and bluff stability, all of which are important in determining erosion risk along the Wisconsin Great Lakes shoreline. Now, the past 3-4 Keeler Fellows have been working on the third update to this manual, and we've divided it into 3 major sections bookended by an introduction and some appendices. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time just touching briefly on each section. Now, the introduction is kind of self-explanatory, although we do make it a point to emphasize that erosion is an ever-present feature of the Great Lakes shoreline. Now, the first major section of the Coastal Processes Manual focuses on conditions on the coast. So here you'll find chapters on water levels, landforms, hydrology, and how to assess and mitigate coastal erosion. Now, some of these chapters go in depth and provide formulas that technical staff will find useful. However, property owners will also benefit from these figures. We also include descriptions, pictures, drawings, to help just provide the reader with a basic grounding in coastal processes, and then explaining various mitigation techniques that can help protect your property. Now, the second section in the Coastal Processes Manual focuses on analysis. Within this section, we explain how to assess flooding danger and bluff stability. And we also felt it was important to highlight the unique problems associated with low water levels and touch on some coastal safety issues. This section gives technical staff and interested homeowners the basics of how to analyze flooding and erosion threats to their properties. One of the major updates in this manual is helping people to interpret and read the new Federal Emergency Management Agency maps, the FEMA maps, and for those who are familiar with the acronym. The manual will help explain what the maps mean, what they don't mean. Now, the bluff stability chapter provides some simple formulas to the reader that the reader can use to estimate the bluff stability on their property. And this is shown on in the box on the top right of the slide. Now, we don't mean for these formulas to take the place of a professional estimate. We merely want to provide the reader a sense of the state of their bluff. We've also decided in the final chapter in this section to highlight coastal safety issues, so currents, water level hazards, and wave hazards. We feel this is a very important coastal topic. In fact, my brother-in-law saved a woman from drowning in South Haven, Michigan last summer. And we have the news clipping there on the bottom right. Now, the final section deals with resilience considerations. So these chapters focus on how the future climate of Wisconsin could impact coastal properties and types of resilience strategies that can provide coastal protection under a variety of conditions. So in this slide here, we have a picture of dune grass on the left, which is important in keeping sand dunes in place, protecting them from wind erosion as well as wave. And the graph here on the right was recently released by the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change Impacts, showing the percentage change of precipitation in Wisconsin during the summer months. Now, there are several graphs of this type included in this particular chapter, and these are used to help educate the reader on potential future conditions, which we then follow up with a chapter on some sustainable, resilient shoreline strategies and frameworks to help cope with these possible conditions. Now, finally, we have provided several appendices towards the end of the manual, and we feel this will be beneficial to readers, as well as a list of some coastal tools and resources for further information. Now, as for the publishing date, while we don't have an exact estimate of when the manual will be ready for distribution, we do have enough work finished to make a late 2020 early 2021, sorry, a late 2021, early 2022 release probable. Now, this manual is geared specifically towards people on the Great Lakes coastline of Wisconsin, but we believe that individuals who live on the coast of inland lake shorelines will find some useful information in the manual as well. Thanks, back to you, Lydia.
Great. So because one of the underlying themes of this Wisconsin Water Week conference is resilience, we wanted to provide you with an example of how technical staff from a Lake Michigan community identified risk to a property from extreme lake levels, storms, and erosion, and then prioritize those vulnerabilities to implement some appropriate risk reduction strategies. So the Racine Health Department led a project starting in 2015 to improve nearshore water quality at the Samuel Myers Park in Racine, Wisconsin. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the area, this park is located on the open coast of southwestern Lake Michigan and experiences really high wave energy. So prior to the Samuel Myers Park restoration project, water was overtopping the breakwater extending from the shoreline and causing erosion. And you can see the breakwater, this rock line here extending from the picture on the left. So the overtopping of this breakwater resulted in the formation of a channel of stagnant water that was redistributed across the beach every time the breakwater was overtopped. Also, vegetation at the site consisted primarily of Phragmites, which is a really pervasive invasive grass and outcompetes native vegetation. You can see it here. It's all these brown patches up back in the park. Additionally, there was surface water runoff from the upland area where they have the parking lot and the grass. And that was also contributing to poor nearshore water quality, which was leading to algae blooms and the exceedance of recreational water quality standards. So the restoration project aimed to tackle multiple issues impacting the resilience of the shoreline. They received funding from the US EPA Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, Fund for Lake Michigan, US Forest Service, the US Fish and Wildlife Service, and then a few other sources as well. So ultimately, with this support, the breakwater was raised by about 3 to 4 feet to prevent overtopping, which you can kind of tell in this picture. It's a little difficult here on the right. But it also provided an area of protection from that high wave energy I was talking about, which supported the installation of some constructed wetlands you can see here in the back. The constructed wetlands were connected with a culvert, you can see right here. And there was a channel built right along the breakwater to help mitigate the impacts of storm surges and runoff. Also, a French drain system was built underneath the main public access point, and dissipators were installed to reduce runoff intensity to the constructed wetlands. And also, dunes were formed to help capture runoff. So in addition to this construction piece, invasive species were removed and the wetlands were revegetated with native species. They utilized rain garden, bioswale, sedge meadow, and trees to all help capture runoff and increase infiltration. And then finally, a cord walk path, which you can see a little bit right here, an overlook and a gazebo were installed as part of the project to help increase public access to the park. So staff on the project said that during this installation, they learned that well-researched design plans may not account for all site conditions, including those associated with lake level rise and climate change. So these pictures are showing field observations after a storm event, which resulted in several amendments to their project plan, including that culvert, French drain, and dissipators that I mentioned. And so they had to make these adjustments to help better manage the impacts of large storm events, and adaptive management, was really integral to the success of this project. So all of this work led to about 3 key results. First, the nutrient levels were decreased and recreational water quality improved, which allowed for an offshore swimming area to be open to the public. Second, several mammalian, reptile, amphibian, and bird species have returned to the park's native habitat, which you can see here established really well. And then finally, access to the park and the shoreline was really improved for the public. So with this idea of resilience in mind, I just want to mention how this project team was resilient in the face of COVID-19. So currently, the project team is managing the long-term maintenance of the project, which includes weekly surface and groundwater monitoring within the wetland and nearshore areas. It also includes plant community surveys, invasive species control, and then, routine cleanups and upkeep of amenities. So as you can imagine, or as you may know from your own experiences, the ongoing pandemic has really made managing and preparing for hazards on the Great Lakes more challenging. However, the Sam Myers project team needed to continue making progress on this restoration project because they had multiple active grants. And so they were able to adapt to several challenges to ensure the success of the project. And I'll just go through a few of them. First, they utilized creative scheduling and coordination so that they could continue working safely and in accordance with all of the new social distancing and safety guidelines. They staggered work hours, days, and locations, and then they had their interns support the project remotely or in the field, and then when they needed to use social distancing in the lab or in the field when necessary. Second, they typically host volunteer and external partners, including the Great Lakes Community Conservation Corps and AmeriCorps groups. Unfortunately, they were unable to host these groups during the pandemic. However, to help with some of the work that these groups usually are helping with, they were able to hire college student interns. Third, the lab testing for both restoration and water quality monitoring was delayed. And though they weren't able to get their water quality samples out in real time because they weren't working with those core or community groups, they did continue to gather and analyze the data. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that of the 3 full-time staff working on the project, 2 of them had to balance their typical work responsibilities with pandemic-related work, which included assisting with contact tracing and the Racine reopening plan. So the staff had to balance their work time to overcome these COVID-19 related obstacles, and they were successful in doing so. They met all of their grant targets except for a single delay in the start of the Fish and Wildlife Grant, which was unrelated to the pandemic. So with that story, I just want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. Please feel free to contact Adam or I with any questions or follow-up. And with that, I think we have some time for Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Lydia and Mike and Adam, for your presentations. Just so you know, I checked the poll results and only one person said that they were very familiar with the Wisconsin Coastal Management Program, with everyone else answering kind of somewhat familiar to not at all familiar. So great audience for the presentations today. So we do have one question in the Q&A, and please continue to submit your questions if you have any for Mike, Adam, and Lydia. So the first question is your organization working with the DNR for remediation of the beaches, as well as several state parks along the Lake Michigan shoreline?
So I guess I could answer that. So we're working with all the state agencies as well as local governments on beach issues, whether it's beach health, beach safety, and as Adam and Lydia talked about, the coastal processes to ensure that there is sand at the beaches.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Still waiting for some more questions. I don't know if people are lagging because we're close to lunch. But maybe Lydia and Alan and Adam, sorry. Are there lessons, maybe the most important lessons that you feel like you've learned from working on the manual, that you feel like you want to take with you post fellowship, or yeah?
That's a great question. I think one of the key messages for the communities that we've been talking about more and more is just that, these coastal hazards don't go away just because water levels change. And so it's really taking that resilience framework and thinking about these issues long term. So while like the hazard may decrease for a period of time, we know that lake levels rise and fall. So really planning ahead for that next time that lake levels rise or fall, depending on what your hazard is. Maybe if you're working in ports and marinas, low lake levels aren't good for you. So that's kind of one of the key takeaways that I kept to keep reminding myself. I think it's a really good point that this manual is emphasizing.
And if I could add to that, it was in 2013, we went around the coastal management program around, did 4 workshops to talk about low lake levels. And I ended every discussion with, but just wait, it'll change. And we never expected it to change quite so much and quite so fast.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, when I had a lot of fun working with the Milwaukee Historical Society, digging up old erosion pictures, because it's not something you think that you know, your grandparents might have had to deal with in like the 40s. And I think I even saw a couple of pictures from the 1930s. So yeah, it just kind of dawns on you that the erosion, the cycle, the water level cycle, it's been here even before man, and it's not really become a problem until you start, you know, you build a structure that is within, you know, wave or wind erosion distance off of the shoreline. So that was cool. And then I think just having the experience writing the manual with the help of our mentor Adam Beckley at University of Wisconsin Sea Grant, and you know, being able to take information and present it in a way that the reader will find useful, picking which information that we think is, you know, will really help the reader come away with something they can work with, as well as I guess lost my train of thought. I think just being able to pull information from different types of sources. So Lydia did mention earlier in the presentation that there's not really any one-stop shop, if you will, for how to deal with coastal erosion on the Wisconsin Great Lakes shoreline. And I think having it kind of all available under one roof and one manual will help a lot of people. And then, you know, being able with the appendices to direct them to further information. So it's not all, you know, it's not an all-encompassing in any manner, but enough there to give them a good base, and then with some external links that they can go and find other information that maybe they're interested in, or would, I guess, that would help their property and help them decide how best to tackle the erosion on their.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really important observations all around. Maybe another question would be, do you have any sense of how past erosion compares to present day coastal erosion? I know you were saying kind of the installation of structures, but is there any longer term data? I know there is some shoreline inventories and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so there's the Wisconsin shoreline, Wisconsin shoreline inventory and oblique viewer. I believe if I got that name right. It's a really great visual tool, and it shows the Lake Michigan shoreline, and there's photos from several different years so that you can see the change in the shoreline visually. And there's also some information about how the shoreline has changed. So looking at if it's receded, you know, if there's any bluff erosion, and it also indicates if it is like a high risk area, or if it's kind of a protected area with low risk for erosion. So it's a really great way to visualize that information and pair it with some numbers if you're interested in seeing the number piece. But recession rates are tricky because they can happen, you know, bluff failures can happen all at once, and that's going to push the shoreline back pretty far. But one thing that we like to say, or they can happen really slowly, I guess is the other side of that. But one thing that we like to say is past recession rates do not predict future recession rates. So it's important to look kind of over the long term to see how the shoreline has changed over a long period of time, and just kind of keep in mind that because something was not eroding much in the past doesn't mean it won't erode in the future, and that kind of piece. I don't know if Adam, you have anything to add to it, but those are my thoughts.
No, yeah, I think you summed it up very nicely, Lydia.
Great. One more is maybe how do coastal erosion issues compare kind of on the Lake Superior coast versus Lake Michigan coast? And does the guide that you're working on apply to Lake Superior as well?
Yeah, I don't think we delved too deeply into Lake Superior versus Lake Michigan. I think in writing this manual, we do focus on the Wisconsin shoreline. There is our kind of resilience versus future climate is more geared towards Wisconsin folks and people who live on that coast. But we had the opportunity to present in front of the Great Lakes Coastal Management Program meeting last September, and our point was that this guide isn't just limited to those on the Wisconsin coast. So, but all the Great Lakes coast will be able to use the information that we present, and whether it's Lake Superior, Lake Ontario, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, Lake Superior. And we don't really spend, at least in the manual, a whole lot of time comparing erosion and recession rates on Lake Superior versus Lake Michigan. It's kind of all bundled into one chapter focused on erosion rates, and then what homeowners can do, whether you live on Lake Superior or Lake Michigan, because we do have chapters on different types of coastal structures. So, coastal structure, depending on what kind of coastal structure, whether you're talking about bluff or beach, you can use kind of that to take away different concepts from the manual.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
like
Wisconsin's really unique where it has a range of shoreline types. Just on Lake Michigan, we talk about it because it's the biggest shoreline we have, but Superior too. There's a variety of shoreline types, but the hazards across the both Great Lakes, are comparable. So the information applies, and we especially share information in those appendices for like recession rate studies and slope stability studies that have been done in both places, so that they have that information.
And as Adam mentioned at the presentation to the Great Lakes Coastal Program managers, there were a number of them that I think commented after their presentation that they had a copy of previous edition of the processes guide on their desk at that point. As the coastal program, we've worked individually on local government levels on helping them with ordinances and advisory documentation to prospective property owners and people who intend to make capital investments on their shoreline, so they understand what the consequences are of coastal erosion.
Great, thank you all so much. So we're not having any other questions coming through the Q&A. Does anyone have any parting thoughts? We do have still 3 more minutes.
I guess I could mention, so annually in September, we have a proclamation of September as Coastal Awareness Month. Along with that, we do produce our annual document, the Wisconsin Great Lakes Chronicle, which I think was the screenshot on my last slide. And that with a lot of Lydia and Adam's work and other things, so it's available on our website, which is pretty easy URL. It's coastal.wisconsin.gov. And I encourage anybody who has any questions to reach out to either of us.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you for all of your hard work. It's a really awesome guide, and I'm excited to see the next iteration. So with that, I think we'll maybe end just a few minutes early. Thanks again to everyone who joined us in the audience. Sessions will be reconvening at 1:30 p.m., but right now we're in our lunch break, so I hope everybody has a good break. Again, please don't forget to visit the exhibitor sponsor booths, participate in the Wisconsin Water Week challenges, vote in the photo contest, etc., all of which you can find in Event Mobi. And thank you again, and we'll see you soon.